He sat on the same corner every day for 3 years. Same torn jacket, AMA cardboard sign, same invisible existence. The business people rushing past didn't see him anymore. He was just part of the scenery, another unfortunate soul they had learned to ignore. But when the gunman burst through the bank doors across the street, firing shots into the ceiling, everyone scattered, everyone except the homeless man. What happened next would reveal why some heroes hide in plain sight. Welcome to the human stories. Before we begin this incredible tale of courage, sacrifice, and redemption, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter more than you know. The corner of 5th and Main in downtown Phoenix had seen better days. The old Wells Fargo building cast long shadows across cracked sidewalks where Daniel Mackenzie had made his temporary home. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, not that anyone was counting except him. His cardboard sign, weathered and faded, simply read, "Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." Most people avoided eye contact. Some dropped loose change without looking. A few regulars, the coffee shop owner, the postal worker, the security guard from the office building, they'd nod, sometimes stop to chat. But to the majority of the city's rush hour crowd, Daniel was invisible. Just another casualty of circumstance they'd rather not think about. What they didn't know was that Daniel Mackenzie had once been Staff Sergeant Daniel Mackenzie, 3rd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. Shrapnel in his left leg from an IED outside Fallujah. A Purple Heart he'd pawned for rent money 2 years ago. And training that never left his muscle memory, no matter how many nights he'd spent sleeping on concrete. The bank across the street opened at 9 a.m. sharp every weekday. Daniel knew because he'd been watching it for 3 years, not planning anything, just watching. Counting customers, memorizing routines, noting the armored car schedule. Old habits die hard, even when you're trying to forget everything you used to be. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Daniel had been awake since 4 a.m. Sleep came in fragments when your bed was a piece of cardboard behind a dumpster. The early commuters were already flooding the sidewalks, suits and briefcases, coffee cups and cell phones, everyone in their own urgent bubble of importance. At 9:47 a.m., everything changed. The first shot echoed off the glass buildings like thunder, then another, screaming. People scattered in every direction, some diving behind parked cars, others running blindly down the street. But Daniel didn't move. He couldn't, because he'd heard that sound before, in places most people only see in nightmares. Through the bank's large windows, he could see the gunman clearly. Black ski mask, dark clothing, assault rifle held high. Amateur stance, nervous movements, the kind of desperation that made people dangerous and unpredictable. 3 employees were on the floor, hands behind their heads. 2 customers, an elderly woman and a young man in a business suit, were pressed against the far wall, terror written across their faces. Daniel's training kicked in automatically, assess the threat, count the exits, identify cover positions, calculate angles of approach. His mind, clouded by months of malnutrition and exposure, suddenly snapped into focus with the clarity of a combat veteran. The gunman was shouting something about money, about time running out. Through the window, Daniel could see the bank manager, a middle-aged woman named Sarah, who'd sometimes brought him coffee on cold mornings, fumbling with the safe. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't work the combination. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but Daniel knew they were at least 5 minutes away. In 5 minutes, panic could turn to execution. He'd seen it before, in places where seconds meant the difference between going home and never going home again. Most people would have stayed put, called 911, waited for the professionals. But Daniel Mackenzie wasn't most people. He was a man who'd once carried a wounded comrade 8 miles through enemy territory with a dislocated shoulder and a bullet in his thigh. He was a man who'd earned the right to be broken, but had never learned how to quit. Daniel stood up slowly, his joints protesting after hours of sitting on cold concrete. His limp was more pronounced now, The shrapnel in his leg had shifted over the years, untreated by VA doctors who were too overworked to care. But his mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. The homeless man everyone ignored was about to become the most important person in downtown Phoenix.
He approached the bank's side entrance, the one the employees used for deliveries. The lock was electronic, but Daniel had watched the pattern for 3 years. He knew exactly how long it took for the mechanism to reset after someone entered the code. More importantly, he knew Sarah always propped it open with a small wedge on delivery days. Today was Tuesday, delivery day. The door opened silently under his touch. Daniel slipped inside, his movements as quiet as they'd been during nighttime reconnaissance missions in Kandahar. The gunman was still at the main counter, back turned, shouting at Sarah to hurry up. The hostages were 20 feet away, huddled against the wall, too terrified to move. Daniel had no weapon, no backup, no plan beyond stopping whatever was about to happen. But he had something most people didn't, the kind of training that turns ordinary men into lethal weapons, and the kind of experience that teaches you when hesitation kills. The gunman never saw him coming. Daniel moved like a ghost, using the marble pillars for cover. His approach was textbook: stay low, move during noise, strike when the target is distracted. 3 years of living on the streets had made him thinner, but his muscle memory was intact. His hands still knew exactly how to disarm a threat. The takedown was swift and silent. Daniel's left arm wrapped around the gunman's throat from behind, while his right hand grabbed the rifle's barrel, twisting it away from the hostages. The attacker struggled, but Daniel had 40 pounds on him and 30 years of training he'd never been able to forget. "Let go of the weapon," Daniel whispered, his voice calm but carrying the authority of someone who'd given that order before. "Let go, and nobody gets hurt." The gunman thrashed wildly, trying to break free, but Daniel's grip was iron. The rifle clattered to the floor, and Daniel kicked it away from reach. In less than 30 seconds, the situation was over. The hostages stared in shock. Sarah's mouth was open, her eyes wide with disbelief. The elderly woman began crying, not from fear now, but from relief. The young businessman pulled out his phone, hands shaking as he called 911. Daniel held the attacker until police arrived, speaking to him in the same calm tone he'd used with hostile prisoners years ago. "It's over. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you if you cooperate." When the first patrol car screeched to a halt outside, Daniel was sitting on the floor, the gunman's hands zip-tied behind his back with plastic restraints he'd found in the bank supply closet. The weapon was safely unloaded, ammunition separated and placed across the room. The police burst in, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Daniel raised his hands slowly, clearly, and spoke in the measured tone of someone who'd worked with law enforcement before. "I'm unarmed. The threat is neutralized. 1 suspect in custody, weapons secured, no casualties." It took 20 minutes for them to sort out what had happened. 20 minutes of questions, statements, and growing amazement from the officers who'd expected to find a bloodbath, but instead found a textbook neutralization. Detective Maria Santos, a 15-year veteran of the Phoenix PD, pulled Daniel aside while the paramedics checked the hostages. "That was some serious training you just displayed," she said, studying his face. "Military?" Daniel nodded. "Long time ago." "How long?" 15 years since I got out. 3 years since I got out of everything else." Detective Santos looked at the man standing before her, hollow cheeks, clothes that hadn't been washed in days, the unmistakable wear of someone living rough. Then she looked at the scene behind him, a perfectly executed takedown, hostages unharmed, suspect secured with professional precision. "You saved lives today," she said quietly. Daniel shrugged, "Just did what needed doing." But as the crowd gathered outside, as the news crews arrived, as the story began to spread across social media, the city of Phoenix was learning something it hadn't expected. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. The bank manager, Sarah, who'd brought him coffee on cold mornings, stood by the ambulance, wiping tears from her eyes. The elderly woman he'd saved pressed a $100 bill into his hand, money he tried to refuse, but she insisted he take. The young businessman, still shaken but alive, asked for his name. "Daniel," he said simply. "Just Daniel." But by evening, the local news had identified him as Daniel Mackenzie, decorated Army Ranger, homeless veteran, and unlikely hero. The story went viral overnight. #JustDaniel began trending on Twitter. The video of him calmly waiting for police, the unconscious gunman at his feet, was shared millions of times. What the internet didn't see was Daniel walking back to his corner that night, still carrying the same cardboard sign, still planning to sleep on the same piece of concrete. The world had changed around him, but he hadn't changed at all. The next morning, there was a crowd waiting at 5th and Main. Not the usual rushing commuters, these were different people. Veterans who'd driven across the state to shake his hand. Families who'd brought food and blankets. Reporters who wanted to hear his story.
Daniel sat in the same spot, overwhelmed by the attention. A local TV reporter pushed a microphone toward him. "Mr. Mackenzie, people are calling you a hero. How does that feel?" Daniel looked at the camera, then at the crowd of faces watching him. He thought about the question for a long moment.
"I'm not a hero,"
he said finally.
"Heroes are the guys who didn't make it home. I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time, with the right skills. That's all."
But the reporter pressed. "You risked your life for strangers. You had no obligation to help. Why did you do it?" Daniel's answer would be replayed on news stations across the country for weeks.
"Because that's what we do. We serve. We protect. We don't stop being soldiers just because we're not wearing the uniform anymore. And we don't stop caring about people just because people stopped caring about us."
Within a week, Daniel's life had changed completely. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $400,000. A local veterans organization offered him housing and job training. The bank hired him as a security consultant. 3 different publishers wanted to buy his story. But the most important change happened on Thursday, when Detective Santos returned to 5th and Main with a folder under her arm.
"I've been looking into your record,"
she said, sitting beside him on the curb.
3 Purple Hearts, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor. You were a ghost, Mackenzie. Black Ops, the kind of soldier whose missions were so classified they don't officially exist.
Daniel didn't respond.
You were medically discharged after that IED. Traumatic brain injury, PTSD, chronic pain. The VA lost your file for 2 years. No benefits, no treatment, no support. You fell through the cracks.
"A lot of us did," Daniel said quietly.
Detective Santos handed him the folder.
"Not anymore. This is your complete service record, reconstructed from classified databases. Every medal, every commendation, every mission you completed. Your congressman wants to meet you. The VA wants to fast-track your benefits. And the Army wants to invite you to a special ceremony." Daniel opened the folder slowly, page after page of his military history, operations he'd tried to forget, men he'd served with who'd never made it home. His hands shook as he read. "Why does this matter now?" he asked.
"Because this city hell, this whole country needs to remember that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear torn jackets and hold cardboard signs. Sometimes they're the people we walk past every day without seeing."
The ceremony was held at Chase Field before a Diamondbacks game. Daniel, cleaned up and wearing a borrowed suit, stood at home plate while 48,000 people rose to their feet in thunderous applause. The stadium announcer read his service record. While Daniel stared at the crowd, tears streaming down his face.
Ladies and gentlemen, Staff Sergeant Daniel Mackenzie served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was wounded in combat, earned multiple decorations for valor, and spent 15 years as a homeless veteran on our streets. Last Tuesday, he saved 5 lives in downtown Phoenix. Tonight, we honor not just his heroism, but his service, his sacrifice, and his reminder that every person has value, regardless of their circumstances. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. But for Daniel, the most meaningful moment came later, in the parking lot, when a young soldier approached him. The kid couldn't have been more than 19, fresh-faced and nervous. "Sir," the soldier said, I'm deploying to Afghanistan next month. I just wanted to thank you for showing me what real service looks like." Daniel looked at the young man himself, 30 years ago, full of hope and determination and the belief that he could change the world. "You take care of your brothers over there," Daniel said, shaking his hand. "And remember, the mission doesn't end when you come home. It just changes. Keep serving, keep protecting, keep being the person people can count on, even when they can't see you." 6 months later, Daniel was working as a security supervisor at the bank he'd saved. He had his own apartment, regular meals, medical care. But every morning, he still stopped at 5th and Main, bringing coffee and sandwiches to the people who'd replaced him on the corner. Because heroes don't retire. They just find new ways to serve. And sometimes, when the city needs them most, they rise from the shadows where they've been hiding, reminding everyone that courage isn't about the uniform you wear or the house you live in. It's about the choice you make when someone needs help, and you're the only one who can provide it. The bank still has a plaque by the front door. "In gratitude to Daniel Mackenzie, who reminded us that heroes walk among us every day." But Daniel's favorite recognition is smaller, more personal. It's a handwritten note from Sarah, the bank manager, that he keeps in his wallet. "Thank you for being there when we needed you. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. Thank you for showing us that everyone matters. Some men are born heroes. Others become heroes through circumstances they never chose. But the rarest heroes are those who remain heroes, even when the world has forgotten they exist." Daniel Mackenzie was all three. And now, every morning when he walks to work, past the corner where he used to sit, he remembers that the most important battles aren't always fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought on American streets, by American veterans, for American lives. One corner at a time, one person at a time, one moment of courage at a time. So tell me, have you ever walked past someone who might be a hero in disguise? Have you ever ignored someone who might have been exactly what you needed? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, every person has a story worth hearing. Thank you for watching The Human Stories. If this story touched you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all forms. We'll see you in the next story, and until then, keep looking for the extraordinary and the ordinary people around you. Channel Branding Package. Channel Name Options. Primary Recommendation. The Human Stories. Alternatives. Untold Valor. Silent Heroes. Stories that Matter. The Forgotten Brave. Channel Description. Every week we share powerful stories of ordinary people who do extraordinary things, from forgotten veterans to unsung heroes, from acts of quiet courage to moments that restore faith in humanity. These are the human stories that deserve to be told. Our mission is simple: to honor those who serve, protect, and sacrifice without seeking recognition. Through emotional storytelling, we celebrate the heroes hiding in plain sight, the warriors who never stopped fighting, and the everyday people who remind us what true courage looks like. Subscribe to never miss a story that matters. Share to honor those who've given everything for others. Comment to tell us about the heroes in your life, because every human story deserves to be heard.